Good morning and welcome to this latest webinar, which we are organizing as Europe Direct Core platform. For those who have been following us already, you'd know that as a Europe Direct Center, we have now been organizing regular webinars to keep the business community and the local entrepreneurs informed about European issues which have an impact on their enterprises and also on the community at large. And today, I'm happy to introduce a topic which is extremely close to my heart, which is the social economy in the EU. And to discuss this topic, I also have with me a panel of very knowledgeable and very esteemed guests who will be sharing with us their insights, both from an academic perspective, but also from a hands-on and grassroots perspective. So their own experience of being actual players and active within the social economy. So I'm going to come to you and kindly ask you to introduce yourselves. Maybe we can start with you, Chensu. Good morning, first of all, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thanks for the invite. I'm Censo Caruana. I am actually an educator, and my specialization is education for sustainable development. But I've had a long-term interest in the social economy. Since more than 20 years, I was part of a new project to promote the social economy in the Mediterranean. I was a co-founder of the Fair Trade Cooperative, which was one of the first social enterprises way beyond, we started a discussion in Malta about the law. And more recently, I've been involved in research about social enterprises, in particular the EU mapping update on social enterprises, and actually also some research on what we call WISE, the Worker Integration Social Enterprise.
So definitely looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Censu. Viviana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning. My name is Viviana Premazzi. I'm a social entrepreneur, and also my background is in research. So I bring together, let's say, also different perspective. I work mainly my company on intercultural management, intercultural communication. So it's also social innovation and social impact. This is our field, and the same as research linked to migration and social cohesion. So everything related to social economy is of course of interest and linked to what I do every day. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting, Viviana, and then Roland, definitely last but definitely not least. Good morning.
Good morning. I am representing at the moment the Malta Cooperative Federation. I'm the CEO and Secretary General. I'm an accountant by profession, and I've been in the cooperative movement now in Malta since the 90s. So I don't have to say how long that has been. And the federation is pretty active at the moment. Well, I will look forward to how this seminar progresses.
Thank you for that. If you allow me, before we kick off with the panel discussion, I'm going to share a very brief presentation. As I often do, we start these webinars with just an overview of the general framework from a policy perspective, and also some information about the measures relating to the topic at the EU level. So I think before we can actually start having a debate about the social economy, it's important that we all, I mean, of course you are all active in the social economy, but also for the benefit of our viewers who might not all be familiar with this concept. So the social economy concept arises from the fact that there is actually a significant proportion of the economy, both within Europe and also locally, which is intended to make profits, so to speak, or create an impact for its people, rather than its investors or owners. And these enterprises, so to speak, would include cooperatives, non-profits, foundations, and also social enterprises, and we'll also speak about social enterprises in more depth later on. They operate within a broad range of commercial activities, and they provide both products or services, or some even both. And they in turn generate millions of jobs across the EU. And perhaps what's particular about the social economy is that these enterprises are considered to be actually the engine for social innovation, both within our business community, but also within society at large. Social economy enterprises actually represent 10% of all businesses in the EU. And I myself was quite surprised to come across this figure, although I am active in the sector, but I wasn't aware that the sector is so large and therefore so important. These enterprises involve or employ more than 11 million people within the EU. And as we said, their primary objective is to serve their members and not to obtain a return on investment as the traditional mainstream companies do. The members, in turn, act in accordance with the principle of solidarity and mutuality, and they manage their enterprise on the basis of a one-man, one-vote principle very often. Perhaps this varies as well from one jurisdiction and another, depending as well on the legal frameworks that apply to that particular social enterprise or foundation or whatever entity that would be. Social enterprises, they are an important and growing group of the social economy enterprises. This concept locally is relatively new in the sense that we have, of course, a number of entities which identify as social enterprises, but we do not have a formal official legal definition. But we're seeing some developments in this field, and we will also discuss this together. And it's important, therefore, that when policymakers work to improve the overall business environment in Europe, they factor the specific characteristics or criteria of these social enterprises. So although there be regulating or creating policies for enterprises in general, I think the policymakers need to keep in mind that social enterprises or other players within the social economy have specific ways of working, a specific ethos, specific characteristics also when it comes to how they govern themselves, so their corporate governance, the way they carry out their accounting, issues such as the asset lock and the retention of profits, and also then, last but definitely not least, would be the social objectives which relate to these kind of enterprises. Again, important to remember why these enterprises are important. In terms of membership, they include within them up to 160 million people in Europe. Okay, so this is different to the people who directly work within these enterprises, which is the statistic that we referred to earlier on. Their objectives actually contribute to the EU's employment, social cohesion, regional, rural development, environment protection, consumer protection, agriculture, or third countries' development and social security policies. So the social economy enterprises contribute towards the achievement of a vast range of policy objectives. And we need to remember as well that the vast majority of these enterprises are actually small and micro businesses. So this is the reality both in Malta and also across the EU. So obviously when we are regulating for these enterprises, when we are creating measures to support these enterprises, it is important that this is kept in mind. Some challenges that social enterprises come across. They're not so different from the challenges of regular enterprises, if you like. So access to finance is quite a challenge, both for social enterprises, but also mainstream enterprises. However, what is perhaps more specific to social enterprises is that there is a low degree of recognition of these kind of enterprises. So perhaps both from a policymaker point of view, but also a consumer or client point of view, there isn't sufficient understanding of what these social enterprises are and the benefits that they bring along. So even in terms of, for instance, legal recognition, not every country includes a legal recognition of social enterprises within their legal framework. Other challenges, varying regulatory environment. So perhaps the sector, the social economy sector, would be quite advanced in some countries, such as Ireland, for instance, but maybe not as advanced or still at the early stages in other countries, such as Malta. And something that is common, however, across the EU is very often social enterprise managers and startup founders would not have sufficient entrepreneurial skills. So very often they would be very knowledgeable about the cause that they are looking to address, but maybe not so much the entrepreneurial skills that would be required to make sure that their enterprise can operate properly and has the impact that they desire. Last but not least, next week on the 16th of December, the European Commission is actually launching a new action plan for the social economy. So we're very much looking forward to that and seeing what the plan will include. But what we know is that with this plan, the Commission aims to propose a coherent set of measures which are aimed at creating enabling conditions for the social economy to be able to fulfill its potential and in turn contribute to a fair, sustainable and inclusive growth. So we very much look forward to next week to find out more about the measures that will be included in this plan and how these will benefit social enterprises across the EU, but also social enterprises in Malta. So that's just a little bit of an introduction, just a basic overview. And maybe we can now start our discussion. And my first, perhaps most obvious question is, we've heard about the state of the social economy in the EU, but what is the state of the social economy in Malta? Do we have a social economy in Malta? Who's going to?
If I can contribute, there have been some studies conducted, not recently, but the first one I know of is around 2012, and the results showed that the social economy in Malta is based on voluntary organizations and sports organizations, band clubs, church entities, and independent schools. Those are the main social enterprises that were reported that exist in Malta. The state of the social economy is that with these kind of setups, most of these enterprises are voluntary organizations and are based on donations. And I think what the EU is aiming at is that social enterprises become businesses first of all. And with that, with the generation of income and profit, they can contribute towards the society in a manner that is adequate. Mm-hmm. With a difference, obviously, because when people talk about businesses, they they think that it's for profit and people will get, or the members or the investors will get a contribution. But here there is where the difference lies. So volunteer organizations believe that nothing goes to anyone except to the objective that they have. But in this setup, which is not very commonly found in Malta, the business generates income for the objective. It's a bit not a usual situation for Malta, and this is the state that I think exists here. So one needs to see how to develop and make the country really understand that this is the way forward. We have, all we need to do is look abroad, look beyond our shores, and we realize that many activities, many businesses exist where this objective can be reached in a different way, rather than by voluntary organizations only.
This is also about financial sustainability of these enterprises, because if one is a volunteer organization and they rely primarily on donations, grants, whatever, that is not always sustainable, as we have seen as well, for example, with the pandemic, where many donations were being withheld, obviously, because of the situation.
That's correct. This is the situation, and one must be very careful on how to achieve those financial inputs, because this is one of the problems that all the reports have talked about, especially in the current situation in Malta, that with donations and volunteers you cannot run a business. No. So the donations are one aspect, and the volunteers, from our experience, we have realized that volunteers are also a very big problem, because volunteers do volunteer their time, but they usually don't commit. They commit, but to a certain extent. So one has to realize that if you have a business and you need to open the shop, even you have a shop for whatever objective, the shop needs to be open, normal hours, and the patrons can come and find whatever they need to find. Unfortunately, volunteer can decide that he's got other commitments and is not going to come to work because that's not work for him. So this is also an aspect that most of the studies have brought up recently as well.
Jen, so you have also carried out some studies, right? You said in your introduction.
Yes. Actually, perhaps to add to what Roland has contributed, my starting premise is that the development of the social economy in a country usually depends on two factors: what we call the top-down, which is like policy development, and what we call bottom-up, which would be the various initiatives, whether started by cooperatives or by VOs and so on. And from my own analysis, it seems that we are lacking behind in both, to be honest, in the sense that the policy framework has suffered from a lot of hiccups in a way, and also the fact that the social enterprise bill has been so slow to arrive where it has arrived now, and it is still not the grand finale which we are expecting. So from a policy development, I think we're lacking behind, and from bottom-up initiatives in general, from my own research, there is both a lack of awareness about the social economy. There is also confusion on what it is about, so lack of clarity apart from lack of awareness. And then what Roland says, in the sense that if the VO sector is the one most probably associated most closely with the social economy in Malta, but then the VO law itself has a lot of limits to trading, it is already not the best place where to see the social enterprise, for example, apart from the fact that the biggest numbers that Roland talked about, such as the sports and band clubs, are also sometimes considered a bit as a gray area, in the sense that they are more from their members rather than for the community. So I think that overall, there's a lot of space for new initiatives and development regarding the social economy.
I'm going to just go back to something that you have said, Chensu. So I'm not sure if I understood right. So what you said in terms of bottom up is that players within the social economy themselves don't fully understand what the social economy is.
Yes, actually, from some of my own research, some people just confuse it with a general non-profit organization. Others tend that this was the strongest, considered CSR, like a company doing CSR, as actually a social enterprise. That was one of the biggest lacks of clarity that I found. And also because there are very few practical examples, people are not so familiar. You know, I was in Budapest, I visited different social enterprises. I can see a coffee shop, that's a social enterprise. It's a worker integration. You know, I have a reference point. I've seen it. I know how it works. I think this lacks. We don't have so many examples of good practice to get inspired.
Viviana, your reactions to this? Because we've also spoken a lot so far about social economy players being primarily the voluntary organizations, but there's a different aspect.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't mention before, and you will know Roberta because he was also among the pioneers on this. But I also among the founders of SIAM, Social Entrepreneurship Association Malta, and this is exactly one of our aim was Senso and Roland they were mentioning is first try to promote awareness. So who are the social enterprises? Because a lot of people, and especially like SMEs or micro enterprise or even self-employed, there are actually social entrepreneurs, but they don't know because, and this is more the policy side, there's no legislation. So this is something. The second one is that also we need, but like any other countries, then let's say switch towards social economy, a cultural change. So it's like you can doing well while doing good. We just had a webinar on this, and it's true. So you can generate profit, use the profit for the company and use the profit for the society, generate jobs. So there's nothing bad in generate profit. It's more like what's then how the profit net will be managed and the impact of that. And the second one, then again, it's common also in other countries, not only Malta. And again, it's part of the cultural change, are all these silos. So there are like the NGO and the voluntary sector, and then there is a for-profit sector. Well, there is a lot that we can learn from each other and actually, let's say, build together this ecosystem. Because then I agree with Roland. So the volunteer is also that sometimes they don't have the right skills. But in the profit sector, you need to have the right skills. You need also to train people to get the right skills. But then they can use those skills in the voluntary sector, and the same like people in the voluntary sector can actually then use their skill in the profit sector. So it's also really an investment in terms of people doing well and doing good for then not only the people, but also the planet. So I think that is really key.
Okay, Viviana, so with this in mind, okay, so this idea that, you know, maybe what some entity first operated as a non-profit now is looking at profit-making approach and becoming more like a social enterprise. But we have seen as well in the initial presentation that there is like a call from the policymakers to be aware then of the distinct features of social enterprises versus mainstream enterprises or the regular enterprises. What are these specific characteristics, and how do social enterprises or other players in the social economy vary from mainstream enterprises?
Yes, so we know that there are like different policy and legislation. So then there are also different way of where you measure your profit and how much of your profit you reinvest. But definitely, while you're making your profit, you're promoting a social impact, and you have actually you're taking care of the social and the environment. So that is for sure something. So it's about the mission of the company, and then is of course is about then the profit that you generate then is then dedicated to again making an impact, but it's not CSR. So because then again, like as Sense was saying, in that case, like any company could be a social enterprise, but that's not the case, because again, you have to have your objective very clear, that is. And now we have seen, and we've seen this also at the European level, linking the social economy and the social enterprise also to the SDGs. Again, this is good because many companies actually, they are also transforming themselves to become more respectful of the environment and of the SDGs. We know also it's kind of like fashion at the moment to have like and to mention the SDGs. So this is also something we have really to pay attention, because you also have to respect people that, let's say, they were there since the beginning, they were committed to the cause since the beginnings, and just not that they're trying to, let's say, clean their reputation to be more attractive. So I think this is very important, and it's where we need, one, the awareness from, since was mentioned, from the bottom up. So I'm a social enterprise because since the beginning, I want to have a social impact. I'm promoting a respect towards the environment, the people, the social cohesion, locally and globally. Second, I'm reinvest part of my profit. And then again, top down, because we want recognition of this and not just someone that is like, again, cleaning the reputation using social enterprise or SDGs.
Chensu and Roland, your reactions to this, also from your own knowledge and experience.
Yes, perhaps. I mean, I think, Viviana said, that there are basically, in my understanding, but also based on how the EU sees social enterprises, you have the entrepreneurial or economic dimension, which is sometimes problematic actually when a voluntary organization wants to move towards becoming a social enterprise. In fact, from some of the research I did, at least conceptually, a company would find it a bit easier to go towards a social enterprise than a VO would go, because it needs more of a cultural way of how to start seeing things. And sometimes the mission is so strong in the case of VOs. So that would be the second dimension of social enterprise, the social dimension. But sometimes it's very strong, but then the VO would lack the entrepreneurial or economic skills. So that could be a bit of an issue. And then I think the third dimension is the question of governance within a social enterprise, within the social economy. I think the whole question of inclusive governance, participation in decision making, and that's also one of the reasons why I also personally feel that, for example, cooperatives could easily lend themselves to the idea of a social enterprise, partly because the whole question of inclusive governance is a core aspect of what a cooperative is.
Yeah. I'm going to not add on, but to complement what Chensu is saying, the aspect of cooperatives within the social enterprise. Wherever you look around, you will find that cooperatives fit the social enterprise definition because both have the same principles. For example, the ICA, the International Cooperative Alliance, has years ago issued their 7 principles, which are open and voluntary membership, democratic membership, economic participation of the members, and here where there is the defined difference between cooperatives and social enterprises, because in social enterprises there is no member economic participation in the very sense of the word. That is, the member does not get direct benefit from the proceeds, but it gets benefit by participating within the social enterprise. Autonomy and independence, you will find this as a definition also. Education and training, I think Viviana mentioned this one. And we have one which is particular, which is cooperative among cooperatives, cooperation among cooperatives, which is a particular aspect. And concern for the community, the co-ops are based for that as well. So in reality, if you look at the research, one can make a direct fit. And the part where I was talking about the members' economic participation, nothing stops the statute of of a cooperative to remove that directly in the statute. That is, the member will not be getting any proceeds from or profits or income by way of dividend because it is a social enterprise. So that also would fit social enterprises in the legal form.
Censo, Roland, sorry, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here, but if we already have the framework for cooperative that has been defined and now it's quite developed, as in we've had it for a number of years now, why do we need another framework for social enterprises? Do we need?
I probably you're talking about the legal notice that has been launched recently, which is not legal notice actually, the acts which is still not passed through Parliament. What the idea there is not to create something new, but is to create a definition for a social enterprise. I would say in the same way, there is a definition for voluntary organizations. So a voluntary organization can be a co-op, but can also be a company and can also be an association. The same for social enterprises as it is being defined. That is, you have a cooperative that can also tag itself as a social enterprise and can also tag itself as a voluntary organization. So
sounds quite complicated for who is not perhaps
basically what the legislation, the proposed legislation is doing is giving you a definition. You can be a cooperative, but now you're going to also, like a license, get a license to also act as a social enterprise. So the legal vehicle remains the co-op with its regulations. But the social enterprise defines the co-op. That is, you have the entity working in a certain manner, but it's working in a certain manner because it's a social enterprise. And it won't be able to depart from that. I think Censo wants to.
Yes.
I mean, when I was doing some research about Malta for the EU mapping, what became clear is that since we do not have a specific social enterprise law, so we don't have a social enterprise label, we said that ex lege, like by law, ex lege, there are no social enterprises. So then we looked at the VOs, the cooperatives, and the companies that de facto, that in reality were acting as a social enterprise. So you could be a company currently where, because of your social aim, your entrepreneurial dimension, and the inclusive governance, you could de facto be considered as a social enterprise. And the same for a cooperative. If sort of you satisfy the economic, social, and governance criteria, you would be de facto acting as such. And the same for a VO. What I understood is that, for example, if you are a VO, even if for research purposes, I can define you as a de facto social enterprise, when you come to go to the business support services, you might not be eligible because you are a VO. While having the social enterprise label would give you eligibility for that type of support. So there are issues also in not having the label and not having the law behind you.
Censo, you said you looked at the voluntary organizations, the cooperatives, and the companies. Do we have many entities, enterprises in Malta who would fit this within the umbrella of the social economy? Is the sector thriving, or?
In my opinion, it's the opposite, in the sense that we have very, very, very few examples, and I'm also a bit cautious to mention or not mention names, because even from the time I did the research 2 years ago till today, there were some changes with some closing down. I mean, some are official. You can go to their website and they say, listen, we were a company, we were functioning in this way. Due to COVID, we decided for now to suspend our operations. So even more, when I had a look just recently, even part of my own research of 2 years ago is already in a way old, because there have been so many so many changes. But in my opinion, even the de facto social enterprises are still very, very, very few in number.
Viviana, I saw you nodding.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, this discussion about the definition, because yeah, as I mentioned, I think we also, that we think we are social enterprises, we actually are not sure, because yeah, there is a definition, there was like a bill for like a legislation, there are some examples in other countries, so it's really a matter of understand who we are and what we can become in case, and how. And this is why I think it's very, very important to have the ecosystem, and also this kind of conversations, so to know from like different experts in the sector and from research where we stand, where do we want it to go. And so, because what we have seen in SIAM, and I think like the success that we are having, because like we always in our meeting and in networking event, we have a lot of people joining, a lot of people liking the page. I think there is a lot of interest in Malta in the topic, and also again a lot of need for guidance. Again, let me know who we are, how I can become a social enterprise. I have a good idea, I think I want to make an impact, but what I can do, I just register myself as a VO, or just start my company. So I think there is this need, and we have seen this, I think, every day with SIAM.
Just to clarify, my research did not focus on social entrepreneurs, but on social enterprises, which is the unit. Yeah. So of course, some of the people very active within the discussions of social entrepreneurs, as individuals, I couldn't include, because my brief was to focus on the unit.
Viviana, from your own experience working with other social enterprises maybe, and also your experience within SIAM, what would you say are the main challenges that you have observed for social enterprises? We've seen in the presentation as well some common challenges for players in the social economy at the EU level. Are those similar locally, would you say?
Yeah, I think they are, for sure, because access to funding is something. Again, we're not sure which kind of funding. We see maybe that the voluntary sector can get certain funds, we cannot, but at the same time, maybe it could be difficult for us to step and get the other kind of funds that they are for the traditional companies. So definitely that. And so linked to this, I would say more than the access is also the ecosystem that is actually what we are trying to create. So who can help me? I'm a micro or small social enterprise, so who can help me to understand which funds are available, how I can like structure a good proposal to have them, or to be eligible for that. Entrepreneurial skills, I think also this, because as someone was mentioned before, and I totally agree, like it's difficult for VO to become social enterprise. At the same time, they don't recognize, and I work also with big NGOs, they don't recognize that they're already companies. So the way they have to run, it's the way they run a business. So it's like they don't want to be a business, but they're already a business because they have to manage funds, even if they don't have to generate funds. And so it's also a matter to understand that, you need the entrepreneurial skills, and also that being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. And so also in this case, you have to understand if it is really what you want. Maybe you have a very great idea, but it's not, let's say, the good, it's not being a social enterprise or becoming a company the way for you to promote the idea. But also in this case, and another request that we have seen in the last years is mentoring. So again, help me to understand if my idea is good, how I can then structure my idea, and it's better for me to become just a project and give it to some like association, or become a company. And I think another dimension that is maybe specifically for Malta and for businesses is also that sometimes you can have a great idea, but then you need like resources that are not in Malta, or you need like suppliers that are not in Malta. And so there is a lot actually that you have to think about to develop your business idea. And again, you don't know where to start, you don't have the funds, you don't have And this is why, again, building an ecosystem, but also sharing best practices and not stay, let's say, in our silos on profit or not for profit, I think it can really be benefit for everyone.
Thank you, Viviana. I obviously relate a lot to what you are saying. Roland, is this the same for cooperatives? Are the challenges similar?
Basically, it's not because you're a cooperative, as Viviana was saying, it's the idea. So if you have an idea, you can create any kind of legal structure and then be considered a social enterprise. It's what is behind the idea that's important. That is, we have had some persons who were interested in forming a cooperative to become a social enterprise, and eventually, when the bill is enacted, they will apply for the label. But the main issue here is their entrepreneurial skills, as Chensu was saying as well. It's not about the idea. You have to have the business acumen. Otherwise, the business is there to fail. And unfortunately, it does not sound good that businesses that are considered social enterprises fail, because people will associate the failure to the social enterprise community rather than to that specific social enterprise, because of how people look at social enterprise at the moment. But I was listening to the other speakers, and I can maybe put them into three major problems. That is, when a person comes to open a business and he is a social entrepreneur, he doesn't understand sometimes, or she doesn't understand, that it's about running a business, which a business is run by creating income streams. Those income streams have also costs. To generate income streams, you have to know how to cater for the costs. And another issue is human resources. So you must have these three elements to be able to make your business run, whether it's for a social enterprise purpose or not. And this is one of the obstacles or the challenges, if you want to call it, that we come across when we advise whether that enterprise that one is aiming at is going to be a success or not. Not that we can see the future, but from our experience, maybe from my experience as an accountant as well, I can see that the idea is perfect, but the persons who are trying to develop it don't have the skills, as Viviana was saying.
Roland, can these skills be learned? Can we develop these skills in people who may have a fantastic idea but need this kind of help to be able to see their idea come alive?
I think training and mentorship is the solution. Sometimes people don't like mentorship, but it is a solution, especially when you start young. That is, you don't have commitments. You can go and see how other social enterprises work around Europe, for example, or around the world. And you get the idea of the spirit of how it works, not the idea as to what the business is going to be about, but the spirit. I mean, probably Chenso can follow this line of thought, but we've been around to see social enterprises, and the spirit is different from a normal business.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Malta, we don't see that spirit. We see a business as a business of making profits, and the profits are then distributed to the shareholder. Unfortunately, that spirit, and that's when we talk to the Maltese people, we feel that they cannot dislodge themselves from that idea yet, because it's not ingrained in the mind. It needs to be developed. Now I'm talking about social enterprise idea, but a business is always a business. You need to make profits, and people need to benefit from it. The employees need to be safeguarded, whether or not you're a social enterprise or not. You're a business, and you have to be able to cater for the employees. You have to make sure that your creditors are paid. Another aspect, and this is about the cost that sometimes we find, is that, oh, but we are a social enterprise, we get these arguments, and we have to prepare audits because we're a co-op, and we have to do accounting because we have to do accounting. You have to pay taxes as well. And you also have to pay VAT when you're a social enterprise, is VAT applicable. So in that case, if you're not prepared to do all the paperwork, and many of the persons we actually talk to have the idea but are not interested in the paperwork, then it's there to fail. Why? Because if you don't prepare your VAT returns, you don't prepare your tax returns, you start getting fines and you are penalized, and then they start growing and it becomes a failure. So this is one of the biggest challenges that I feel we have at the moment.
Viviana, I'm seeing that you want to react.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something to what was mentioned, because like in Malta, there's no this mentality. One is something that I recently did with a student of mine, that she did a thesis on how also foreigners and foreign companies can influence the local companies on this. And since was mentioning before, also when you go abroad and you see other experience, and let's say you bring back, it's called like social remittances or cultural remittances. And the second one, and we've seen this also kind of forced by the pandemic, and we know that globally, most of the social entrepreneurs are women. And this is also linked again to the culture of the business. And it's good for the planet and the people. At the same time, it's not that being a social entrepreneur is like be a, not a level A, but a level B, let's say, entrepreneurs. So this is also something that we have seen happening locally. So amongst the founders, we are all women. The people that are contacting us, they are mainly women, not all women. But again, it needs to be a cultural change also in that sense. It is not only that women need to turn to social enterprise because they cannot work or have their career, because again, a cultural change need to happen in like work-life balance, etc.
So these challenges and these obstacles, have you touched upon them at all in your research?
Yes, actually quite significantly. And sometimes when we're talking about challenges, we need to look both at the very big picture and then also at the micro picture. And of course, at the peak of when I was doing my research, it was very clear that economically the country was looking in a completely different direction. At that time, the discourse was blockchain economy, like, so the whole idea of social enterprise was really put on the side. So I think we need also to take into account the more macro issues taking place, but also from a micro issue. Recently, within the social enterprises, I tried to delve a bit deeper into what we call the worker integration social enterprise.
Can you tell us a little bit about this?
I mean, basically, I've been abroad and I've been to a restaurant which is run nearly completely by recovering drug addicts, or run by ex-convicts, for example. So rather than wait for someone to give them a job, they group together and create their own work. And I was actually recently teaching in prison mathematics, and I explained a bit the difference between a company, a cooperative, and a social enterprise, and they explained why. And I told them, when you're out, would you be interested in looking at this as one way of perhaps being your own boss, and they were completely like, what are you talking about? Never heard of these things, So actually, for me, social economy and social enterprise are about community development. They are about understanding that although in Malta we have nearly full employment, but there are sectors which don't. So we have to look at those. We need to talk about environmental services. It's a chaos when it comes to waste, but are we seeing this social enterprises as one possible solution? No, we aren't. I mean, mental health issues are increasing. Are we seeing social enterprises as a possible solution? Social housing, So I think that very little analysis has actually been done. So there's also an issue from that point of view. And then apart from the low unemployment rate, apart from the reality of a black economy, which is quite thriving. So sometimes rather than, organized and, you find a solution within sort of, the black economy, at least you're managing to survive rather than organizing. And then, of course, a lack of an enabling law. I think when I was looking a bit at disability issues, for example, although there has been a huge improvement moving away from the charity model, but I think we're still a country which is relatively a top-down culture. I think we still prefer handouts as a natural solution. So this entrepreneurial spirit is not so strong. And then, of course, the limited history of social enterprises, the limited history of social cooperatives. And I was very happy that both Roland and Viviana mentioned mentoring, because since I've entered in this sphere, the more I think about it, the more I'm believing that mentoring could be a solution. Also because sometimes we work within already existing structures, but when you want to create something new, mentoring becomes so important. And I think right now the challenge is to create something new, to understand the social and environmental challenges and understand that social enterprise could be one possible response. It is being done abroad. Erasmus Plus has been used successfully by VOs. Why not by, people interested in forming social enterprises? So, and then of course the mentoring aspect will give you a one-on-one support. I mean, I've done the last 4 years a lot of work on mentoring, but with teachers, but I've seen results, so
Yes.
I'm sure that it could be extrapolated to different situations.
Yes, certainly. So we've talked about the obstacles and the challenges, and we've started touching upon some possible solutions with the idea of mentoring, for example. What else would you say would help improve the ecosystem for the social economy locally?
I believe there has to be an element of political will, in particular, political will, because if Jens was talking about housing, cooperatives or housing social enterprises, housing social enterprise don't start from nothing. They need some inputs. Now, from some research that I've made on this topic, of even the Federation has done, especially from the Nordic countries, housing cooperatives and housing social enterprises are very popular. But it doesn't start by people joining together and buying a plot of land and building on it. But usually it starts by local councils realizing that there is a social problem, and they try to, the local council tries to find a solution. So finding an abandoned plot of land or a derelict building and saying, look, you're going to have this property, this land for so many number of years. Like that, the cost of the land is put aside. And then on that, the persons join forces, go to the banks understand the social enterprise world. They pass on the necessary loans so that it is built. And the structure here is that the cost of the building does not have the element of the goodwill, does not have element of the profit on it, because it's going to be at cost. So the housing, the property is going to be at a much lower level, a much lower price than you would find it in the normal in the normal community. So in the normal business structures of how it works. So if there is no political will to assist social enterprises, and that's where I feel I want to see the bill says that there are going to be incentives for social enterprise. This is one of them, for sure. Local councils have to find a way of helping in a social enterprise objective. Chensu was mentioning the greenery, the environment. There are social enterprises, they take care of the greenery around the towns. Not that there is much left at the moment, but that's what happens abroad. And they can create a business from that, like producing flowers, and they sell them for profit, for example, from little plots of land that the local council decides to give a social enterprise for that incentive. I want to see ideas for worker, not only participation, but not ideas, policies, where workers can buy their own business from their employer. And why am I saying this? Because there are employers, especially in a micro environment like of Malta, who are going to pack it up soon. And rather than packing it up and just leaving, they could and close their shop. They could pass on their business to their employees. But the employees cannot just buy the business of their boss. They need to have an incentive. And I know that these exist around Europe, this worker buyout, they're called. So these are a few of the incentives that I'd like to see, but there must be political will. For example, just to talk about the housing, because we've had meetings with government, both in this legislature and the previous. You cannot have social housing based only, or else with the lessees, or being of the same problematic status. You need mixes, and you need persons who can afford houses in the same block, but which are upstandard. So you cannot just say, okay, I'm going to have a social housing block, and all these are going to be persons that are below the poverty line. It's impossible. It won't work. Why? Because I am a social enterprise. I need to make profits. So I have to have units inside that block, and probably they have to be more, the percentage are larger, so that they can assist those that cannot pay. So the politician, unfortunately, thinks about it in a different manner. Okay, government is going to assist, but all you have to put in there is persons below the poverty line, for example, but that will not work. So even government needs to understand what a social enterprise is. And it's a business. It needs to make profit. It can't afford not making profit, and therefore not being able to sustain that development if it's gone through a development, because the banks need to be paid at the end of the day. So, and then this is also another issue, the situation in Malta, and probably not only in Malta, about bank facilities. I mean, it's going to be an enormous task for social enterprises to obtain banking facilities. So one needs to also look at that aspect. There are also due diligence aspects that I'm not going to delve into too much, but the issue of due diligence at the moment is so important that it might scare those social entrepreneurs who are doing it because they love the environment, they love the structure, but due diligence aspects could be a detriment to the whole project as well. So I need to see some opportunities or some ideas that obviously come from the states. They can't come if a regulation is being done from the states. The state has to lower the benchmark of that regulation, or create a regulation where it will be possible to work with it. for social enterprises.
Something maybe that I'd like to bring up, we've mentioned it, but I'd like to bring it up because I think it's pertinent, because I can already anticipate maybe some viewers who would have been listening to this last intervention saying, but that brings about challenges in relation to fair competition, and rightly so, because if I am, let's say, a mainstream entrepreneur and I am competing with a social entrepreneur who's having access to resources at a lower cost. So what I would like to remind is that within the structure of a social enterprise, there would be what is called an asset lock, which means that there is a limited amount of the profits that can then be disbursed to the shareholders. And that is also what distinguishes a social enterprise from a normal enterprise, so to speak. I think it's important to remind about that. Cenzo, Viviana, some reactions to what Roland has just shared with us as well?
I mean, for me, if we're talking about solutions, I am a firm believer in multiple solutions working in synergy and not with one solution, you know? So personally, I feel that some have already been mentioned quite in depth, like the whole question of mentoring, and for me, education, because I'm coming from the education perspective, and unfortunately, education is usually an afterthought. So we need to learn how to design projects where education starts from the beginning and is part and parcel of each and every step, each and every intellectual output, call it whatever you want, rather than let's disseminate some results at the end. I think that's a completely wrong approach. I think it's coming out very, very strongly from our discussion, even if we haven't used the word specifically, the question of advocacy. I think there is a lot that can be done in this sphere, also to try and guarantee as much as possible this enabling social enterprise framework. So I think it is also an aspect where we need to strengthen our different organizations. The idea of exchanges to make examples of good practice more known, and also the idea that Roland mentioned of inspiration. And then, of course, I think we need to continue investing in research, especially to understand how and why social enterprises could respond to some of the emerging challenges. I mean, Roland went a bit in depth into one particular emerging challenge. He wouldn't have been able to go into that depth if he hadn't already done some research. So I think we need also to invest more in research, in particular, to understand the key role that social enterprises can take when it comes to responding to emerging challenges.
Roberta, I need to react a little bit to your comment regarding the unfair competition. Research shows, or there is a lot of, how am I going to put it? Many argue that social enterprises give an added value. That added value, if you add it with the business, should remove the unfair competition aspect, because those that are in competition on the same level of business do not offer the added value the social enterprise does. So there is this talk about, is there unfair competition in this sense? For example, the EU says you can have special incentives and you get more points when you apply if you're a social enterprise. There were those that were saying, but this is unfair competition. The EU states, no, this is not anymore an unfair competition, because the added value the social enterprise is giving, that enterprise that does the same business does not give it. So those extra points offset the unfair competition aspect.
Wow.
It's a complicated matter, but at the same time, the EU made it very clear. Yes, social enterprises, if they work as a real social enterprises, can have extra points if they apply for a tender, for example.
A bit like the concept of positive action in issues of discrimination. So you have a little bit of a push because the intention is to achieve a particular aim. So very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Viviana?
I think I agree with most of the points that have been shared and already mentioned. I think that what Roland mentioned is fundamental also, because then the risk is if you're only trying to be doing good, and then you have problem also with social cohesion, for example, with social housing. If you just put let's say the same people in needs in the same building, you will, so it can be just a temporary solution, but it's not actually a long-term solution. So sometimes business can help you also to think about sustainability that can have. So again, and I totally agree with Census. So it's multiple level solution and multiple stakeholders involved, because you really need to have the perspective and not just, let's say, your limited perspective to your own field or your own actions, and that's extremely important. And we're lucky also to be in the EU and have the opportunity also to have like Erasmus Plus and all these other projects, so that can, and also, let's say, coming late maybe in this sector is good, because we can learn also from the lessons and the mistakes that the other made. So hopefully that will be also the case.
True, it's true. Thank you. I'm very mindful of the time, so I'm going to ask you to do a quick round of final messages. If you had to share final messages to our viewers, what would that be?
If it's just like a vision, but since I personally have been involved in many volunteer organizations for many years, and I see that many of them would like to scale up, would like to have more impact, but at the same time, they sort of get stuck at one point. I really envision a future where you have VOs who open up a social enterprise as one of their branches that would then support their sustainability and also their mission statement, instead of limited to small numbers because of the inability to scale up. They would be able to have much more impact by reaching out to bigger numbers. So it's a sort of long-term vision which I can envision for my country.
Great. Viviana?
Yeah, for me is kind of also call to action and call for start now, in the sense, yeah, if you have an idea, if you want to become maybe a social enterprise, you can get in touch with SIAM in Malta. We tried our best to support us, but also like being here with Roland and Senso, I think we can also maybe develop some partnership together to again learn from each other. We are at the beginning, but at the same time we are in the field, so I think it would be great to partnering in something and build this ecosystem.
Certainly. And Roland, your final message as well.
Yeah, I can do the same like Viviana, and the Malta Cooperative Federation is definitely willing to assist not only persons who want to do the traditional cooperatives, but even social cooperatives. So we will be willing to not only partner with you guys, but also to assist in social and entrepreneurial training, social enterprise entrepreneurial training. So this has been on the back burner for quite some time with the federation, but if there is input from those who are inside the social enterprise field, definitely can create some new aspect. And it's not only for the entrepreneurs that we were always thinking about, but education for public and the not only the business community, but even those that are in government, and not in the very top area, but those that are in government, so they understand the social enterprise. And one little last thing is that we've had problems making the banks understand what a cooperative is. Lawyers understand what a cooperative, accountants understand what a cooperative is. Now, with the new law, we're going to have another challenge. We're going to have the same issues to make bankers understand what a social enterprise is, accountants, lawyers, and even politicians. And this is going to be a very big challenge.
So new challenges ahead, but I fully agree with the point made, being that to achieve good outcomes, we need to work together. And I think I'll wrap up on that final note. I thank you very much for your very, very valuable interventions, also your contribution to the sector, and I very much look forward to working with all of you going forward. Thank you so much. Thanks.